Stephen Hawking once said, hey, look, be careful about broadcasting into space because you don't know what's out there, and you're alerting them to the fact that we're here, and who knows, maybe 99% of them are, very peace-loving and into poetry and stuff like that, but maybe 1% of them are not, they're hostile, and if you happen to hit those guys, maybe they will, do something terrible like trying to, obliterate the Earth or something else that would ruin your whole day. You can make that argument if you're of that sort, if you're kind of paranoid about letting anybody know that you're around. But the facts are that we have been doing that for the last 70 years. Ever since the Second World War, we've had FM radio, we've had television, and mostly we've had radar. So the radar set down at the local airport, that's broadcasting into space. Well, sure, it's not great programming, but anybody who's advanced enough to actually come here will have big antennas and they'll be able to pick that stuff up. So we've already sort of, rang a bell saying, hey, by the way, there's not only life here on Earth, but there's life that can build a transmitter. If you want to worry about that, it's too late to do much about it. We've been doing it for 70 years.
On August the 15th, 1977, a radio telescope called the Big Ear detected a radio signal from somewhere in the vicinity of the constellation Sagittarius. And this is the printout from that night. You can see that somewhere around 10:15 Eastern Standard Time, a very bright radio signal pulsed in. It looks something like this. You can sketch it out. It was a pulse with a width of around 72 seconds, and the peak intensity, the peak brightness, was over 30 times the brightness of the background radio emission from the galaxy. So it's fascinating. And it came in on a wavelength that SETI believes an intelligent civilization might choose. The same wavelength etched into Voyager's golden disk. The wavelength was 21 centimetres. That's the wavelength of light, of radio waves emitted from hydrogen atoms. So the whole sky glows at that wavelength. And back in the 1950s, radio astronomers speculated that if an alien civilization wanted to communicate with us, then they might well choose that very special, natural wavelength to send their message. So surprising was this, that when it was spotted a few days later by an astronomer called Jerry Ayman, he circled that pulse, that 72-second flash of radio waves, and wrote "wow" next to it. So this has become known as the WOW signal. Today, over 35 years after the WOW signal was detected, there's still no satisfactory explanation. It doesn't seem to have been local, a military signal or a satellite, and indeed nobody's supposed to transmit at the hydrogen line frequency. It's reserved for radio astronomy. But scientific results have to be repeatable, and even though we've turned our telescopes in the direction of Sagittarius many times since, nobody has ever heard anything. So I suppose it has to remain just an interesting anomaly.
See, all I got is my time. All I got is my
1961 has the first really dramatic and well-publicized case of alien abduction.
Betty and Barney Hill were driving through the White Mountain area of New Hampshire.
It's late at night. Betty sees this unusual light that seems to be maneuvering.
This light stopped in midair directly in front of us. The car motor stalled, and at that point, I realized that they undoubtedly planned to take us on board.
And then the next thing is that they're 35 miles down the road, and they have no idea how they got that far down the road. It turns out they were missing 2 hours.
My wife decided, well, we should notify someone, and we thought of notifying of the military base located in this area.
A radar had detected something unidentified and had reported it through channels inside the Air Force.
They had tracked an unidentified craft at 2:14 a.m., just about the time we estimate that the UFO left.
they developed a series of nightmares. And as a result of that, the ufologist told them you should be regressed hypnotically to try to see if you remember more. The doctor who did the hypnosis was Dr. Simon, and he was an expert. And he played the tapes for us. They are terrifying.
All right, here, Captain. What is he? You're still asleep, but you can see it all clearly. Looks like a big pancake with windows. Get away from me!
Something very traumatic had happened to them.
The Betty and Barney Hill case interested my father a lot, and he did take part in a hypnotic interview.
This case did get a lot of behind-the-scenes attention from some very interesting scientists. They wanted to know what happened to Betty and Barney Hill.
But my next guest says the rumors are true because he says he was abducted by aliens 45 years ago. Calvin Parker joins me now. All right, so Calvin, just so I understand this and we'll make it easy for the audience to understand, you claim you were abducted when you were with a friend 45 years ago, and now that your friend has unfortunately passed away, you feel comfortable sharing it because he didn't want to really go too public with it. But let's start from the beginning. You were walking where and what happened?
We were fishing. We actually got off work in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and was fishing at the old Shaw Peters shipyard, and that's where something come in from behind us, and I'm not for sure if it was aliens or what it was, but I'm just assuming it was. And they landed behind us, and three of them got out and took, two of them got a hold of Charlie, and one got a hold of myself.
Okay,
and
one
took
second.
us aboard.
Okay. So when they were coming down, what were they in? Were they in some sort of spacecraft?
Well, no, I was facing the river, and we just seen some lights behind us. So when we turned around, the light got so bright, and they was already there. We didn't even hear them land. They was probably the length of a football field behind us.
So what did they look like when they came into your line of vision?
Well, they had kind of gray wrinkled skin like a elephant or a manatee or something. And then when we got on board, one looked a little, a little more like a human than an elephant like that, but kind of female-looking creature.
Okay, so maybe a female alien. And then what did they do to you when they took you up in space or wherever they took you?
Well, when I was aboard the ship, the female reached and run her finger down my throat and tried to mess with my nasal cavity, looked in my nose, and there was something that come out of the ceiling, and it just clicked about 4 times, and I figured it was like an X-ray or something, whatever they use. And it went back up in the ceiling. Then she summons the old Big Ugly when it come got me, and he took me back outside and set me down at the river.
Okay. Were you terrified? How did you feel when you were being, I wouldn't, maybe probed is the wrong word, but examined by the female alien?
I was scared. I was naturally afraid, and I think they give us an ejection, though, of some kind when they got us, and that's what we assumed when we got to the hospital the next day. Then they took us to Keesler to check us for radiation.
And you say you passed a polygraph test. Is that true?
I did a polygraph, a voice stress test.
Wow.
There was eyewitnesses to this account.
Wow. I mean, Dr. Ford from the top of the show also passed a polygraph.
We have this mental image that a flying saucer will circle the White House lawn, land on the White House lawn, and give us a bounty of all sorts of technological goodies to initiate an age of Aquarius on the planet Earth. Personally, I don't think that's not going to happen. For example, if you're in the forest, do you go out and talk to the squirrels and the deer? Maybe you do for a while, but after a while you get bored because they don't talk back to you, because they have nothing interesting to tell you, because they can't relate to our values and our ideas. If you go down to an anthill, you go down to the ants and say, I bring you trinkets, I bring you beads, take me to your ant queen, I give you nuclear energy. So I think for the most part, the aliens are probably not going to be interested in us because we're so arrogant to believe that we have something to offer them. Realize that they could be thousands, maybe millions of years ahead of us in technology, and they may have, well, no interest in interacting with us in the same way that we don't necessarily want to deal with the squirrels and the deer in the forest. Now, some people say that we should not try to make contact with them because they could be potentially dangerous. For the most part, I think they're going to be peaceful because they'll be thousands of years ahead of us, but we cannot take the chance. So I personally believe that we should not try to advertise our existence to alien life in outer space because of the fact that we don't know their intentions. Then the other question is, what happens if they're evil? Well, I think the question of evil is actually a relative question because the real danger to a deer in the forest is not the hunter with a gigantic rifle. He's not the main danger to a deer in the forest. The main danger to a deer in the forest is the developer. The guy with blueprints, the guy in the three-piece suit, the guy with the slide rule and calculator, the guy that's going to pave the forest and perhaps destroy whole ecosystems. In other words, the aliens don't have to be evil in order to be dangerous to us. They might not care. They just might not care about us and in the process pave us over. In fact, if you read the novel War of the Worlds, the Martians in H.G. Wells' seminal novel were not evil in the sense they wanted to torture us and they wanted to do all sorts of barbaric things to humanity. No, we were just in the way. And so I think that is a potential problem. We could be in the way of a very advanced civilization that simply is not evil, but simply views us as we would view squirrels and deer in the forest. So personally, I think that we should not advertise our existence when we go into outer space. For the most part, however, I do think they are going to be peaceful. They're not going to want to plunder the Earth because there are plenty of planets out there that have nobody on them that they can plunder at will without having to worry about restive natives called humanity. And so I think they're not going to come to visit the Earth to plunder us, to do all sorts of mischief. For the most part, I think they'll just leave us alone.